taking, your response to Camilla on the protest and so on. I mean, as despicable as the burning of the flag, the American flag is, and it is a despicable act. But it was done during the anti-war movement against Vietnam. It was done, to protest the war on Iraq and so on, and many other times. But it's what you said. You said that they have the right to do that.
Correct.
And that's really what makes this country different than any other place.
Correct.
So, and you talked about the patriotism of those people who are protesting. And here's my question. Is it appropriate for a foreign leader to come and speak from the Congress, to the raucous applause of those present, about calling those Americans, useful idiots of an animus foreign power, and basically questioning their patriotism and so on? Is it appropriate of him to do that?
So I am not going to make assessments about what the Prime Minister said or what he believes. I will speak on behalf of the United States, and I just gave you our views about protests and how we see the connection between protests and the attempts by the Iranian government to influence those protests. And I'll let the Prime Minister speak for himself.
Well, do we have any information that Iran has actually financed these protests?
We do.
In any way?
We do. We made that public in the statement that they had supported. Now, again, when I say these protests, I'm not speaking to any one specific protest. And as the Director of National Intelligence made clear, the vast majority of protesters have nothing to do with Iranian influence. That is an important factual thing. But yes, we do have evidence that Iran is supporting
evidence that they actually financed some of these protests?
Correct.
Okay. All right, let me just move on then. I have a couple of other things to ask about. Now, I know you mentioned about the loss of life in Gaza and so on, but the new report, it's just staggering, by Air Wars, and it talks about, how accurate the figures that are being, announced by the Ministry of Health in Gaza. And these are horrific figures. I mean, everybody talks about the day after, but really the day now, the present day, is a horrific day. I mean, we're talking about a place that is being subjected to war, where 80% of that space has been destroyed, where a huge number of people have been killed and so on. When you look at it in those kind of percentages and so on, it really is staggering. And how can we go forward looking at this carnage and this, going day in and day out without feeling a sense of urgency to basically say, this is the time to end it?
So a few things. One, with respect to the numbers themselves, you've heard us speak to these before, that I think the term I use, I think they're probably directionally accurate, which is not to say they're accurate down to the precise number or what percentage they're off by. And that is due to a number of things. Number one, the way in which the numbers are being assessed has changed over time, where they're no longer releasing the names, which they were, I think, in the first month or two or three of those who were killed. Second thing is that some percentage of that number, and I think that's unknowable, some percentage of the number that's released are not civilians, are militants, right? And we don't know the exact number. But then it's also true that there are probably, almost certainly, a number of innocent civilians who are buried under the rubble who remain accounted for, who aren't included in that number. So what the actual number is, I think we don't know, but it is far too high. So when you ask there's something you said in the lead up to the question is where do we go from here? And I think what we would say, one of the difficult things that this region has faced for so long is there has been such tremendous loss on both sides of this conflict. Obviously, thousands of Palestinians killed in the war in Gaza. 1,200 Israelis who were killed on October 7th. And I would say the question that we would put to both the state of Israel and to leaders in the Palestinian community is where we go from here ought to be something different, and how do we get there? And the way to get there is to stop the dehumanization on both sides of people who don't look like them, don't believe the same thing as them, don't have the same views, and try to see each other as humans and try to reach political solutions that will break this conflict of violence. And so what we're trying to do as an immediate step to do that, and when I say try to do it, I mean literally right now in a meeting between the president and the prime minister, is to get a ceasefire agreement that would start to build a foundation to get us out of this mess.
Now, my last question regarding the number of UN workers that have been killed, about 366, and my question pertains to the, to the day after in terms of aid and so on, and aid workers and organizations and so on. Do you think this is discouraging for organizations to go in Gaza and do their work?
Yeah, of course it is. Of course, every person who's thinking about signing up to be an aid worker, signing up to deliver humanitarian assistance, signing up to, if you're a doctor or a nurse, to provide medical and assistance inside Gaza. Of course, they can't help, I'm sure, but think about the personal risk that they put themselves under. It's why it's so remarkable that so many people, despite those risks, continue to go do it every day. And it speaks to the enormous courage that they show in putting their lives potentially on the line to help other people. You've heard the Secretary say that the remarkable thing about humanitarian workers is that not just in this conflict, but all around the world, they run to the conflict. When times when other people are, for very good reason, running away, they run to it and they try to help other people. And it just highlights the need to, while the conflict's ongoing, do everything we can to protect humanitarian workers, and we work on that every day, but then ultimately, as I've said, to get a ceasefire.